People should involve their families, in any way. I mean, start with the game of life. It's a silly board game, but guess what? You have to make decisions. Monopoly, you have to make financial decisions and fall on your face to learn. But when you understand the value of money, you'll make those decisions better, hopefully.
Hi, and welcome to Beyond the Paycheck. I'm Paula Christine. So today we're talking with Dana Diaz about the subject of marriage, or not necessarily marriage, just being in a relationship and money, and how sometimes there can be a lot of conflict, and so how to resolve that conflict. So welcome, Dana.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So I know that in a lot of marriages that people struggle to have that, to kind of be on the same page about money. Somebody might be a spender, somebody might be a saver, somebody might be, let's just go with a control freak and want to control everything and not allow the other person to have any type of control. And then some people it's just really simple things that they could do to change that. Let's talk about how you deal with the control freak. If your wife or not the wife, could be anybody, I guess, in general. But how do you deal with somebody who wants total control of the money?
Yeah, absolutely. My first husband, I was with him 25 years, and he was that person, very controlling in many ways, but money was the big thing. And what we decided, when we first got together was the easiest thing was just to take the household bills, and we were both working and doing our thing. We just cut them in half, and it made him feel better to be able to be the one to pay those bills. So I would just write a check to him at the end of every month for half of the bills so that he felt like I was giving, I was making my contribution, and then he was in control. He was the one actually paying them. And that worked out just fine. And it ended up shifting, later, but definitely it was something that worked. And I was fine with it too, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how they get paid as long as they get paid. But I think it is good to have an agreed upon system in place because it eliminates any worrying or guesswork or anything that might cause any friction between two people.
But because at first my husband and I were everything went into my ex-husband, everything just went into one account, and then I paid the bills. And then something happened in our marriage where then we went to separated everything. But as a financial coach, I struggle with that because how do you know that person's also doing what they need to do on their side for when it comes to saving for retirement or saving for goals, where one person might say, okay, I'm going to max out my 401k, and the other person doesn't. So how do you talk about that?
I can speak to a lot of that, actually. I could probably take up a whole half hour. I agree, and I see where you're going with this. So that was at the beginning of our relationship, and then at the point where we got married, because we did buy a house together, and it just worked that way for that time. But the 401k, because we obviously were both employed different places, we each had our own. And he was very, very clear that he was one of these, this is my money, my job, mine, to do with what I want. So even though it's not the kind of marriage that I had anticipated, because I think when you unite in marriage, everything else kind of becomes one and the same for the greater good, but that was not going to happen. So I had to just take that same, kind of perspective on my end. So I had my own retirement, situation set up and my own things. And we just agreed that it would be separate, and that's just how it was. Kind of, I used to joke around and say it's every man for himself around here. But again, as far as the bills getting paid and all that, I mean, we would just have a designated time. We sat down every month. He wrote, so I knew the bills were getting paid. He knew I obviously gave him the money. His retirement was there. Mine was over here, and it was what it was. Not what I wanted, but that's what you get when you are married to somebody like that.
Yeah, I struggle with that because, first of all, you're supposed to be a team. And when you're a team, you work together for the common goal. And when you have one person over here saving, and let's say, I don't know what your husband's income was, but let's say his income was $100,000, but mine's only 30. There's no way that I'm able to pay my half of the bills and save for retirement. There's just no way.
100%. I agree with you 100%. And there definitely was an imbalance. But it, in my perspective, it would be if you make X amount of dollars and I make this, you should contribute that same, equitable percentage to the household bills. But for him, in his mind, and for me, for my sanity and my peace, I knew what I got into. So it was okay for then. But obviously, it's not a surprise that money and finances were, for 25 years, they were the big issue, as they are in a lot of marriages. But it was constantly difficult because he was the spender and I was the saver. I was always thinking, oh, but, our son is going to need braces, our son's education. And he was like, I want a four-wheeler, I want a motorcycle, I want, and just blowing money, and I can even get into the retirement thing at one point in our marriage towards the end of it. And obviously something that contributed greatly to me being fed up with the whole thing was that I found out a year after the fact that he had drained his over $100,000. He drained his retirement money completely. And there was nothing left of it. He didn't even put aside the amount of money he'd have to owe for taxes on it at tax time, which is how I found out about it. So definitely it's something that I think too many people, I mean, I was young. I was 19 years old when I met him. And I think you just think you're going to work, you're paying the bills. As long as that happens, that's okay. But when you enter into a marriage, I don't care how young or old you are, I think you need to have that conversation and really decide and commit to, whatever is being decided. Because had I known I was going to, be in a relationship with somebody who wasn't going to give me a penny, I could be starving, and he'd say, well, you didn't earn it, this is mine over here. It just would not have been, the situation I would have entered into legally by marrying him. And you can find a lot of people out there to love, but there are going to be a lot less people, I think, that are compatible with you financially. But, now that I'm in my second marriage, it's a little different because I came into this situation being like, okay, I like you and all that, but like, why do we need to get married? And if we do play house and do all this stuff, what does that look like? Because I can love you from afar. I can love you from my own house. I can love you without being married. What's it going to look like that's going to be different? Because that crap that I dealt with for 25 years is not going to work for me now. And so it's interesting that we had the conversation, the very serious, it was more the relationship conversation, but it was about money and what does it look like every month? How are bills getting paid? What does retirement look like now that we're both on our second marriages and have grown children and grandchildren and so on and so forth. So it's something I wish I would have done the first time around. Well, but you don't think about that when you're young.
No, but some people don't even think about it when they're older. But true. I think you also you can have those conversations, and it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen.
Correct.
That person could tell you all the things that you want to hear, both male and female. We're not bashing any gender here, but and then when you get into the marriage, it's just not that true. So I think for me, it would be maybe a weekly conversation every Sunday over coffee. Hey, this is what's going on. These are the bills that are due at this time.
Yes.
This is, transparency needs to be huge. Like here's our investment. So you're looking at a cash flow and you're looking at a net worth statement all the time, to have that type of conversation. And it's almost like it's a family business financial meeting. I mean, it doesn't sound very romantic, but a family business financials.
Necessary.
Yeah, it needs to be that type of a conversation.
I love that because that's, in fact, with my second husband now that I'm married to now, that's actually what I said to him from the beginning. I said, whether it's Saturday night at 6:00 or Wednesday at 3, whatever day and time, we need to consult with each other and say, this is where we are now. this is where I'm at in my business or in my, finances going forward. This is, project out a month, project out even for the year, at the beginning of the year, make goals together, make plans together. Because if you're both working towards the same end, then that should be how it is anyway in a marriage, if nothing else. But in any household, everybody should contribute however they can, but to the same end. I
think too, and for children, I think as soon as your children are old enough to understand what money is, and that could be like 3, then you start them into that conversation. Maybe they're not sitting at the family meeting, but you are getting them involved somehow about if it's savings goals or whatever, so that everybody is always on the same page and contributing, what's important to them. But I think couples, and just my opinion from my past experience and from yours too, I think it's important to marry someone that has the same goals that you do, that want the same things. And yes, love is great, but liking them and respecting them, like, this is not a marriage show, but understanding what's important about money. Because I know I hear couples all the time, they sit in my office and it's embarrassing. Like, sometimes it's so uncomfortable to hear them just go at it about money. And you wonder how they stay married. That's the biggest source of contention in a marriage, and it's the cause of, don't they say, half of divorces, So, I mean, I think that realistically, if you're being told this is probably very likely going to be the thing that divides you as a couple and as a household, that you should address it. Absolutely 100%. And I'm all on board with the kid thing, because kids see and hear everything, whether you think they do or not. And one thing I will say is that I used to have to drive my son to school every day. And I remember even 3rd, 4th grade in grade school, I would, talk to my son about money and different things. And I don't know if any of it registered, but we had a moment when he started to drive at 16 years old where he came back from, a fast food place and said, "Oh my gosh, for a hamburger and fries and, the vanilla shake I got, it was this much money." And I said, "Do you see now why I spend $4.99 on the kids' meal and then you get the free ice cream with the coupon on the bag?" And so he went and did that. He was a big boy before that and wouldn't have a kids' meal, but all of a sudden he was on board. But that same kid is almost 21, bought his first house at 19 years old, all on his own, and just sat in my kitchen last night telling me that on a mortgage calculator, he estimated that if he could pay an extra X amount of dollars on his mortgage every month, his house would be paid off in 6 years and he would own it by 25 years old. And I love that. I love that anything I said resonated with him, but I showed him that hard work and persistence in making good decisions from the get-go is going to put you in a financial place, that's definitely better than the one that I put myself in. So I love that. And people should involve their families, in any way. I mean, start with the game of life. It's a silly board game, but guess what? You have to make decisions. Yeah. Monopoly, you have to make financial decisions and fall on your face to learn. But when you understand the value of money, you'll make those decisions better, hopefully. So let's go back to, if we're talking about marriage and money again, like, what tips do you give people who are struggling to communicate? What tips can you give them to maybe make that conversation easier?
Well, like you had just mentioned a couple minutes ago, I mean, to me, that's my go-to. I think any conversation about anything serious that impacts everybody should be planned, because, just making a remark or, somebody's walking out to work and you're like, "Oh, well, when are we going to pay this bill? Where are we going to get the money?" That's not fair to anybody. Right. That's just going to end up in conflict. So I think it's good to have a time and place that, I'm a structured and routine person. So I like the idea of on this day at this time. But even if you have to have a specific meeting about something that happened that you didn't expect, just to say, "Can we talk about this?" Ask the person's permission, because they have to say yes. I mean, they have to be involved in it. And I think it's only fair to set a time and a place and make sure that, yeah, you know, I mean, as much as I'd love to sit and have some wine with my husband while we're paying bills, be clear-headed, be focused, you know, coffee might be better. Do it, you know, when both of you aren't tired and exhausted from the work day, where you could be more invested in the situation and more present. But I think that's the most important thing, and to be open to it when your partner comes to you and says, we need to talk about this. When can we do that? Because like I said, then you come into it more prepared, you know, have the things that you need, the printouts from the statements, whatever you need in front of you, so that you're talking about factual information and not just throwing, you know, accusations or guesstimates out there. Have hard facts. Have hard facts, because you need facts to resolve situations, and essentially all finances are a matter of resolving something to some end. So just and make a plan. I think you know, when you're entering in, as we have already said as well, just like when I was, before I even would agree to marry my second husband, it's like, what does this look like then? Because we don't need this to be part of, we don't need marriage and finances to be part of our relationship. So if we're going to get married and legally be bound and financially tied to one another, we got to be on the same page. Because believe me, I worked in real estate for a long time, and I can't tell you how many couples that surprisingly live apart, because you can love somebody, but that does not mean that you are compatible in all ways. And I think financial compatibility is very relevant and probably most important, considering it's the one thing that will most likely divide you.
I also think that having that conversation, because I've worked with a lot of older clients, and back in, you know, when I think about my mom's generation at this point, because she wouldn't want me to tell you how old she is, but anyway, they usually one person handled the money and the other person didn't. And then the spouse dies, typically the male, and the female is like clueless on how to pay the bills and to do this. And I know that's generational, but I do find that I still see it today in some aspects in some of the younger people, where they just, well, he'll just take care of that, or she'll just take care of that. I don't need to worry about that. But at some point you may have to worry about that if that spouse becomes disabled or passes away. And having those weekly meetings, or biweekly or monthly, or whatever you need to do for your family, makes you more aware of what's going on.
Absolutely. And I can speak to my second marriage. My husband now is 11 years older than me. And, you know, so he's kind of teetering at that, you know, baby boomer generation that we're talking about. And in his previous marriage, that was something that affected him, because his wife was the only one that took care of all the finances. He just went and made the money and wasn't aware of anything. So when they divorced, he had no clue. He had no clue what the state of their finances were. He had no clue where to even go to pay a bill or what to do. And so it was really important to him when we got together, even though it had been how many years, he is very keen on wanting to participate in, because he doesn't want to be left in that situation again. So that's another reason why, you know, that weekly meeting that I suggested with him was so important, was so that he felt like he was participating and that he was aware and he knew, but also for both of us to be on the same page. Because for me, I'm coming out of a marriage where I had somebody that controlled and financially drained us at every opportunity. And I needed to be sure, I needed that reassurance that that was not happening here. So we both wanted to know and be participants. So it works for us because we're both getting our needs met, which essentially is, you know, what a relationship is about if it's going to be healthy and endure the long term.
Yeah, if you take that off the table, I mean, if you take money off the table, I mean, you really just...
A lot of people, I could have even gotten along with my ex a lot longer if money wasn't part of
it. Yeah, well, that control issue has...
that's a whole other thing. That's a whole other story. But money's the thing, though. I mean, money can really damage the relationship, and not just between two people romantically or in a marriage, but I mean, I see it in businesses. I've just recently witnessed two people who knew each other for decades and ran a very successful business the business closed down because they were just too far apart financially and not, I don't know what the specific circumstances were, but it can affect different relationships, friendships even, if somebody owes somebody money or somebody feels like something is owed. I see it in weddings. The bridesmaids all paid this amount except for that one. So everybody attacks her and everybody's miserable on the day of the wedding. I mean, it happens everywhere.
Yeah. Money, isn't what they say, money is the root of all evil?
It really is.
Yeah. So it's been a pleasure talking with you. I mean, I hope that people listen and take this advice to have those conversations, because I think it would save a lot of marriages.
Yes.
It would save a lot of friendships and businesses, because again, it doesn't have to do with just marriage alone, but to have that conversation about money and to make sure that everybody's on the same page and working for the same goals. And then almost too, to have a system of checks and balances to make.
Exactly.
So you don't wake up and find out that your husband drained the 401k to buy his, four-wheeler, so you're not surprised that those things are going on. And if somebody has to present to you what's going on, they're more likely to not make those type of decisions.
Yeah, exactly. I always liken a lot of things in life as to, if you're playing darts, not that I have played them any time recently, but I would want to see and try to aim towards that bullseye. And if your eyes are closed, if you are completely unaware of where that dart's going, how are you ever going to achieve any kind of success? It would just be based on luck. And you might as well play the lottery. And you can't balance any kind of a business relationship or a marriage on those things. You have to have something solid and real. So set those expectations with each other, know exactly what you're getting into, and make your decisions going forward from there. Absolutely.
So really you're an author, and
yes.
your book is about narcissistic relationships. So give out your book title, even though it has really nothing to do about what we just talked about, but I want you to be able to promote how we met each other. But, so tell everybody what the name of your book.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the author of Gasping for Air, The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse, which does talk about my former marriage, much of which was affected not just by various abuses, but by financial abuse, which is a very real aspect of marriages, even aside from narcissism at all. So you can go to my website, danasdiaz.com, click the link to get the book, or go straight to Amazon.
Thank you. It was really a pleasure talking with you.
Well, thank you. You too.
You too.
I wasn't sure what to expect, but it was lovely. Thank you.
It was. I pretty much talk to anybody, so people on the street. So, but I knew just weird gut feeling that this was just gonna go so well anyway. So
good.
I don't know. I think it's an important
I'm like
topic.
you. That's why I get these pod matches, and I'm like, why not? I can speak to just about anything. Been there, done that at some point. So
right. Yes, me too. So, okay. So if anybody wants to get a hold of me, you can reach out to me at paula@paulachristine.com. If you want to sit down and start talking to your spouse about marriage, or anybody wants to sit down and start talking about your finances, please check out my website. There's a budget tracker that can help in that conversation and get it going. So bye, Dana, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.